Good afternoon, folks. It's Sasha with the Group Real Estate. Today we have an interview with Ryan. He's the owner of Quantum Property Inspections, and I just wanted to introduce him. Ryan, if you could please tell us a little bit about your experience and qualifications as a home inspector.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Ryan, and I started Quantum Property Inspections in 2018, and I've been running that and expanding it, and since then. And I came from 10 years industrial construction and project management. Prior to that, I've done time in the oil field. I've worked up north in Fort McMurray, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of industry education or industry experience. And it was just time for a change, and I got into inspections, and it was just a perfect match for myself, my knowledge base, and my personality, and it's been fantastic and really going really good ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know um, most of the questions that I'll be asking, I already know the answers to them. But let's say, um, can you explain to our viewers how long the inspection usually takes, and what kind of information they can receive at the end of the inspection?
Absolutely. So a typical home inspection takes about 3 hours. That's for a house with a garage under 2,000 square feet. It is very fast paced because there is literally, thousands of components we've got to look at, test, and different defects that we're looking for. We've got a list of things going through our head as we're going through that inspection. And it is very, very thorough. We are on the roof, we are around the exterior, we run all the ventilation, we run a large amount of water. We're looking for leaks. We do a full thermal imaging scan of the house. We run the furnace. We open up the electrical panel. We run lots of hot water as well as water in general to function test those water heaters. And then at the end of the inspection, at the end of the 3 hours, we clients and the realtors, and we do a walkthrough of the home. We talk about the systems and their functions and how everything is set up, how they function, as well as any defects or problems that might have turned up during the inspection. And we also try and, because there's a lot of detail that can go into our inspections and our reports. And we have to do that because we're dealing with a lot of different people with different expectations. So some people will think, a small problem is like no big deal, or a lot of general maintenance will think that's no big deal. They don't care about that. But then have some people that are very particular and they want to know every little last detail. You also have some people that are home buyers or new home buyers, and they can think that smaller problems are bigger problems than they are. So why we have to be very detailed in our inspection process and reporting, as well as be able to put everything in proportion for the buyer, let them know how big of a problem this is, whether, if you want to call it a problem, or if it's just a discretionary upgrade, and you want to let them know how common it is. So once we go through all that with the walkthrough, we will have a report ready for them by the end of the day. We always have it ready within the same day. And then, sometimes we'll follow up with the clients, or they'll follow up with us, and we'll talk with them on the phone and go over the report together that way. Everything again in more perspective.
All right. Okay. Let's say, this usual home inspection, uh, and the report that comes with it. Let's say now let's talk about things like, let's say, um, a wood burning fireplace, or do you do any of the radon testing, or can you refer other companies that can provide that service to your clients? So let's say, what are extra services that you can provide that go a little bit above and beyond?
Absolutely. So we do. So there's three inspectors. with quantum inspections, and sorry, 4, and including myself. And 2 of us are residential home inspectors. One of us is residential and commercial, and another one is a well and septic inspector, and he's based in the greater Edmonton area. And so we do offer residential inspections, commercial inspections, and then within that Edmonton area, well and septic inspections. And then myself, I'm based in the central area. I am WET certified, which is WET is an acronym for Wood Energy Transfer Technology, and that is the wood stove fireplace inspections. So I can conduct those. So if I'm coming up to Edmonton for a home inspection and that's needed with the home inspection, I can include that as an add-on service. So we try to, reach as many of the extra add-ons as we can. There are some things that we don't do yet, like mold sampling or air sampling. We don't quite do that yet. We can contract that out or get a hold of somebody to come in and do that. And as for the radon, we do sell radon, long-term radon test kits. So ideally, you want to do a long-term radon test when it comes to radon. The short-term test can be very inaccurate. There was a study that showed something like 95% of the time they can be, they're very inaccurate. And but we have the radon test kits, and that's a minimum of 3 months during the winter that you leave in your basement and you send out for analysis to a lab, and they will give you an idea of what your average radon level. And then if it is found that you do have high radon levels in the house, we can refer you to a company that we know that knows everything about radon, and they can set up a radon mitigation system for you. And you'll actually, once you have a radon mitigation system set up in your house, they typically cost within the range of like $3,000. You'll actually have lower radon levels than you would in your average house.
Right.
I had a quick question on, perhaps not a quick question, maybe a little bit more in depth if we're on the topic of radon. I know newer builds, they have to have a radon rough-in. They don't include any testing along with that. How big of a deal is radon? If you look at a national map of Canada, and you look at radon levels, is it really a big deal that you're seeing? Are people actually getting sick because of this? Is it still kind of unknown? Is this something that, I live in a 1968 bungalow. Is this something that I should all of a sudden get my home prepped for radon testing? I'm building a brand new home. Any day now, it'll be ready. Should I be doing a radon test that day when I'm getting a home inspection done? What would you recommend on, let's say an old bungalow like I'm in, perfect example, and a brand new build? What would be my steps as a first-time home buyer, maybe even a repeat buyer?
So you can do a radon test, a short-term radon test, at the time that you're doing a home inspection. They do short-term radon tests, and I believe the minimum amount of time for a short-term radon test is 48 hours under closed conditions. That means all windows and doors have to be shut. There can be one door, left for egress and access of the home, but typically, all windows should be shut otherwise. But again, that comes back to that study that showed that short-term radon tests can be very, very inaccurate. So, ideally you want to do a long-term test, which is 3 months. And whether or not it's a new home or an old home, you still want to test for radon. Even if they do have the rough-in for that, you still want to do a test for radon. Now, if you did a short radon test and you found that the radon is measured in becquerels per cubic meter. If you found that you had extremely high levels of radon during that short radon test, let's say 1,000 becquerels per cubic meter, then you probably have a radon problem. But then, if you get lower levels, it's still it can be harder to tell whether or not, because you can get um, come up and go down that vary from day to day. And so the Health Canada recommended mitigation level for radon is 200 per cubic meter. Now, I'll give you an example. I have an electronic radon monitor in my basement, and my average is around 84 becquerels per cubic meter. One day, I left the bathroom fan on in the basement, and it stayed on overnight. The next day, I went downstairs, and my radon level had jumped up well over 200 becquerels per cubic meter, and that is over the recommended mitigation level by Health Canada, right? But the reason that happened was because I depressurized my basement so much that there was a
Sucking
positive
it in.
pressure. Yeah, exactly. It basically started sucking that radon into the house. And then I turned it off and I opened the window and vented it a little bit and it went back to its normal, range of 84.
And sorry, what was the minimum that you recommended this test to be done? Because you said minimum, and I've heard that frequently, that a short-term test is inefficient. I remember my one client built a home with Jamin, and he was freaking out because his radon test went through the roof. It was like over 400, and he's sending me screenshots of 200. And then the builder basically said, "What is it today?" And it was like 80, right? So how long would you say would be the minimum?
For a long-term test or a short-term test?
Well, I say, like, what would be the to start kind of getting a good idea on your radon level? What would be the lowest? Because just a 1 day test isn't going to do it. What would
Yeah.
be the lowest sample that you would feel comfortable with?
Well, like I said, like they define a short-term test under closed conditions at 48 hours, but recommended is 3 months. So
Okay.
like basically the better. And you want to do it in the winter as well, because what you have during the winter is something called a stack effect. So you're heating your house, it's freezing cold outside. That warm air within the house is rising. So that rising hot air is actually depressurizing your basement and pulling radon in. So that's why during the winter they say is when you want to do that long-term.
And I mean, when we're doing a deal, subject to financing, subject to home inspection, obviously we're not going to get 3 months for subject to radon testing if under 200, et cetera, et cetera. But do you see it getting to the point where it becomes a big enough deal that people are going to want to see, maybe not even look at homes that don't have a radon test done for X amount of months? Or, I mean, I've heard about this years ago and nothing has changed yet. Do you foresee maybe this coming into deals?
Not really, because of just the difficulty in testing for it. And I think that if too many people start doing short-term tests with many deals, it's going to end up complicating things, because you might get a high reading and or a low reading, and then you move in and you find out you have high levels, and then or the opposite, you do a test
Yeah.
for the sale,
Yeah.
you find out you have a high reading, and then you move in, you actually have low levels.
Okay.
Yeah, I
So
thought as much. Yeah.
Joseph touched um on a topic of, say, new and old, right? So and I hear that a lot from home inspectors when they say, well, back in the day the code was different, right? So um what would be your thoughts on, how would you explain it to your client during the inspection, when you have to bring up stuff like that? So say insulation in the attic, those 8 by 8 inch tiles, that are possibly containing asbestos, stuff like that. So how do you approach situations like that?
Sorry, with older homes in general?
Yeah, like old code and new code, right? Like, or the evolution of building and fire code, let's say.
Yeah. So we basically at that point, like we kind of make disclaimers. Like we let people know that older houses don't have to be up to today's code. They get grandfathered in unless you're doing a renovation, you're pulling a permit for that renovation. anything under the scope of that renovation will have to be up to today's code. But otherwise, your house is grandfathered in. And then, so when it comes to asbestos, I basically make a comment in every report letting people know the certain areas where you might find asbestos, like, certain tiles or vermiculite insulation or certain types of like tape around heat ducts, things like that. And just so people are aware. And then if we see something like that in the inspection, we will, take photos of it, put it in the report, make a point of, and just let people know that this is potentially asbestos containing, because a lot of the products that we use that were known to have asbestos didn't all have asbestos. Like vermiculite insulation, there's certain brands of vermiculite insulation from certain mines in the United States that had asbestos. But now, that being said, we also have very tight regulations with regard to what we consider asbestos containing in Alberta. I think it is 0.1%. Don't quote me on that. But I think that's what it is. 0.1% asbestos is considered asbestos containing, and then they'll recommend mitigation. Whereas you go down to the United States, and the EPA deems asbestos containing products 1%. Yeah, don't quote me on those numbers, but it is somewhere in that scale. And but like I said, it's just kind of almost a difference of opinion or science. Or I'm not sure where they or why they come up with those different numbers.
Mm-hmm. So Ryan offers, same as I do, I have my buyer guide. So Ryan has his inspection guide, right? And I think this is a great tool, because trying to explain it to every client, it's not boring, but it's you can miss a lot of stuff, and you don't know the level of education, right? You don't know what people know, right? But let's say, tables like this one that show years in which these possible issues can be found. Like I think this is, even as a real estate agent, I find it very very, very good table, and showing everything that can become an issue, like poly B, vermiculite, all that stuff, and with actual pictures, with actual explanation, and I bet you all these are from your own inspection. So this kudos, this is a great tool for your clients to use 100%. I don't know, Ryan, do you want to add anything about let's say your partners in Edmonton? Because like you said, you're more of the Red Deer, Central Alberta. And how about your partners that work here in Edmonton that are where we are at?
Yeah, my partner up in Edmonton is got incredible experience when he, before he joined our team, and he came from commercial inspections. He's got a degree in architectural engineering technology, and he has done large scale commercial inspections all across North America, large scale multifamily residential units like apartment buildings. And now he joined up with us, and he does commercial inspections more locally, as well as residential inspections. And yeah, he's fantastic, and he's really great with clients and explaining things to them in an easy to approach and understand way. And then we also have an inspector in Calgary. Again, he comes from an engineering background, and his attention to detail is incredible, and same with the effort he puts into his report. It's second to none.
Yeah, awesome. Joseph, do you have anything?
Yeah, I had a question. You mentioned you touched on poly B. Actually, I'm curious as to what has been your experience with poly B. What's your conversation around it? Because I see that popping up a lot, and for people that don't know poly B, definitely look it up where you're from. I mean, in some places it's not a big deal. I was talking to some clients in Ontario, and they're like, "Yeah, it's everywhere. No one cares about it." But here it's kind of touchy, and I have a lot of friends in the insurance industry, and even being in that industry myself, I get calls from realtors in a panic saying now their home isn't going to get insured because there was too many issues with the properties. Some insurers don't even want to touch poly B. My concern is if there's some that don't want to touch it, how long will it be until no one wants to touch the product? So someone buys a home now and the advice is, yeah, you know what, it's poly B. If it's done, if it pinholes occur, it's not great. There is some issues in the past with it. Or yeah, it's not a big deal. It is what it is. If you don't like it, replace it. Like, what has been your experience around there, I guess, and what's the conversation you have with clients if they're purchasing a home and you notice poly B?
Sure. So I tried to, when I was first starting out, I wanted to put an exact number on it. I wanted to be able to tell clients what percentage of homes with poly B have had problems to date. And nobody has this number. Nobody's done study. However, now that being said, like poly B does have a common problem. Everybody knows that. There's plumbers, you talk to any plumbers, they'll tell you, and it's the same problem every time. It deteriorates from the inside out. And that can depend on the temperature of the water, the content of the water, the chemicals in the water that will deteriorate it. And but that being said, it is still installed over, probably through in thousands of properties throughout Alberta, and most of those are not having any problems, have not experienced any problems whatsoever. So it's hard to say if how long or if everybody's going to eventually have problems or not. Like I don't think anybody can really tell us that accurately. But because of that common problem, and it is, more common to have problems with it than other types of plumbing. And I mean, it was discontinued. There was that lawsuit in the 90s and whatnot. Then insurance companies are wary of it. Now, it seemed like last year that for a time there that there was almost no insurance companies that would touch it. It was all of a sudden everyone was in a panic, and it was like there's no insurance companies that will insure this stuff anymore. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, now this company will, and this company will, and this company will. So as soon as somebody's loss is somebody else's opportunity. So it's all of these other insurance companies said, no, we're not going to touch it. These other guys came up with a new policy and said, we'll take your business. Come on over here. So every insurance company, they have a different risk evaluation process. So some insurance companies will say, we don't mind, we'll take that risk. It's everything else is in good shape in that house. And some insurance companies will say they'll be very specific, like you have poly B and you have an old roof that needs to be replaced. We're not going to give you insurance. If you had one or the other, then we'd give you an insurance policy. Then there's some insurance companies that will say, we'll insure you, but we're going to charge you a higher premium for that, for having that poly B in your house. Then there's some, they'll give you a year and you have to replace it. And otherwise they won't cover you. So
Yeah,
there's
I
no
think
exact
that
answer.
covers it pretty much, because in my experience, I've seen leaky copper pipes and I've seen badly crimped packs. So, it became a problem. And if it's that big of a deal, I think in a real estate deal, you can always negotiate a price adjustment and cover for the poly B replacement cost, and that's about it, right? So, but that definitely becomes an issue for the client, for real estate agent. Doesn't matter if it's sellers or buyer's agent, and for home inspectors, right? So having these conversations ahead of time helps. And I guess that's why I brought up your guide, because it actually brings up stuff that people are not even aware of.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's
So yeah, I guess
So yeah,
we
we just
covered a
probably
lot
had
of
put a
stuff today. For everyone who watched till the end, if you're in the market to buy a property, you can always give Ryan a call. He will definitely inspect that property for you. I have 2 vouchers for $50 discounts with Quantum Property Inspections. So reach out to me if you want to use the discount. Joseph, Ryan, thank you for joining me today. It was a good conversation. I guess, we covered a lot of ground. We could probably spend hours talking about all the other stuff that we have on our mind. But that would be too long of video to cover it all, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, information is going to be in the comments. You can reach out to Ryan if you have any questions or if you want to book a home inspection throughout Alberta. And yeah, have a good day.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
guys. Pleasure chatting with you.